So you want to get your kids to eat more vegetables. I totally know how you feel. When I had my first son, I was educating other people on how to eat healthier, and man, did I think I had it all figured out. I was certain that if I just gave him vegetables before fruit, I would desensitize his preference for sugar, and I would be golden. He would be the best veggie eater ever. Well, turns out that's not exactly how it works. Learn from me. So it is true that I really thought that feeding my son vegetables first was going to be the answer to every problem everyone ever had. Like other people hadn't thought of this before me. I don't know, I was a new mom, I was busy, I cared a lot. You might identify with all of this, and whether you have a new infant or you have an older kid who's not quite the veggie monster that you were expecting, I'm gonna help you understand some simple steps that you can use to actually get your kids eating more vegetables. And I promise it has nothing to do with bribing or cajoling or giving up entirely. But before I give you those steps, I just want to introduce myself. My name is Amy. I'm a mom of two. I'm a natural food chef, and I'm showing up here every week on the Family Kitchen Coach to help you feed your family healthy food more often. I share things like fast meals, tips on feeding kids like the one I'm giving you here today. So if feeding your kids veggies first is not the magical answer to getting great vegetable eaters, then what is? I think it's first important to understand that it is not unnatural for kids to not prefer vegetables over anything else. The thing is that as humans, we evolved to love the taste of sweet because when we were not in a place with so much plentiful food, it signified ripeness and it signified a lot of calories. Now, we live in a day and age where those two things aren't nearly as important, but if you notice a natural tendency towards sweetness in your kids, this is a huge part of the reason why. Think about vegetables, on the other hand, they're a little bit bitter, they don't have that natural sweet taste that we gravitate towards, so it is completely natural if your kids aren't veggie lovers from the start. And that doesn't mean that you can't help them to love vegetables more and more over time. Now, I want to emphasize this time piece. So what I'm sharing with you here today is not a magical switch that you can turn off and on to turn your kids into veggie eaters. Trust me, if there was one, I would share it with you. But on the other hand, there are some simple steps that you can take. The main thing that you need to know is that it takes a long time for many kids to get comfortable with new foods. In fact, it can take upwards of 10 to even 100 exposures to food for a kid to feel comfortable enough to try it, let alone to like it. And I can assure you that all of that bribing and the other things that people are apt to do, or saying you can't have your dessert if you don't eat your vegetables, all that does is point out to the kids that this is something I shouldn't like. Broccoli is not good and ice cream is good, and be less and less likely to try it. I mean, would you like something that someone had to basically pay you to try? But even if your kids aren't eating tons of vegetables now, or they only have a very small variety, the number one thing I want to share with you in this video is don't give up. The second thing I want to tell you is that there are proven steps that you can take to getting your kids to eating more vegetables. The first one is to keep serving them. I like to serve our meals family style. You can see some examples of that over here. And the reason I love family style is it's a low pressure way for my kids to get exposure to new foods and to give them the opportunity to try them when they're ready. This is a very slow game. I have shared before, but my 6-year-old basically never ate soup his whole entire life until this year. And yet I kept serving it over and over again. We would eat it as the parents, and all of a sudden something switched. He decided he liked soup, and now he'll even order it at restaurants. It's kind of amazing. So keep going is my number one tip. The second thing is that low pressure exposure I was talking about is super important. So low pressure looks like putting something on the table, letting it be there, and letting your kids have a chance to decide whether or not they want to eat it. It doesn't look like serving it as the only thing that they can eat, making them eat something before they eat that, or even asking them to eat that before they have seconds. Those are all kind of like sneaky forms of pressure, and even though you're not meaning to do it, it does actually work against your kid trying new foods, including vegetables, in the long run. It's totally mind-blowing, right? In fact, I want to share something from my friend Melanie Potok. She is an amazing feeding therapist who wrote this book, Adventures in Veggie, which I highly recommend if you are looking for ways to expose your kids to new vegetables. And I want to read you this excerpt because I think it's just such important information. She says, Research shows that most caregivers offer new food to a child only 3 to 5 times before giving up and concluding that the child simply doesn't like it. But the same research indicated that in fact it takes 8 to 15 exposures to successfully foster the acceptance of a new food. A handful of exposures that took place randomly over the course of a few weeks simply doesn't offer enough consistency. Some kids will just tolerate the food even after 15 exposures, and it may take even more interaction to learn to eat it with joy and enthusiasm. Becoming an adventurous eater is always going to take experience over a long period of time. Yes, yes, yes. This has been my number one experience as a parent, is one, that it takes longer than you think it's gonna take with eating, but maybe with everything. And 2, that if you persist over time, your kids will come around. And number 3 is if you make it fun, they're more likely to come around more quickly. So in my final tip today, the secret to getting your kids to eat more vegetables, I wanna share with you my 4 steps for making food fun and creating opportunities for exposures that are gonna make it more likely for your kid to try new foods over time. So this 4-step process comes from a number of different resources that I've learned from, but I don't have a great memory, so I'm always coming up with like letters and frameworks that can help me remember. And I'm gonna share it with you today in case it's helpful. So my framework is that a veggie exposure can consist of see, smell, touch, or taste. And honestly, taste comes last for good reason, because it is the least likely thing that they're gonna do right away. But doing all of these steps, not necessarily in that order, but doing all of these steps kind of round and round over and over again, see, smell, touch, taste, is gonna make them more likely to get to that taste experience on maybe the first time, but maybe the 15th time. And I wanna share some examples of what that looks like in the real world here with you today. So probably like you, I have some vegetables that I serve over and over again and that my kids love. Cherry tomatoes, baby carrots, bell peppers. Like those are things I know they'll eat, and so I'm apt to go back to them over and over again over time. But I've been thinking a lot about how I can expand the range of what I make kid friendly, of what I put out with hopes of them eating, and how I can take these steps to make it more likely for them to eat it. Because of course, if I take these steps, see, smell, touch, taste, and they get to that taste more often, then not only are my kids gonna have a more nutritious diet, but I am gonna have less work in creating different dishes and meals for the whole family, which I'm adamantly against. Hashtag whole family, one meal. So here's what see, smell, touch, taste looks like with one of our more challenging vegetables, cabbage. We're starting with a simple see activity.
Mine is gonna be white, green.
And all I've asked my kids to do is to color a picture of cabbage green or purple. I love something like this where there's no actual food involved, because then I won't be tempted to pressure my kids into trying it. Next, we moved on to a see and touch activity where I asked the kids to count how many layers of cabbage there were.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 24, 25. 25. I want to eat some cabbage. Can you cut it a bit so I can eat some?
So cut it into shreds like this. Then we moved on to a touch activity where I asked the kids to use their kid-safe knives to cut the cabbage.
But I'm not going to do that.
You don't have to eat it, but can you cut it into shreds still? You'll notice that I told my 3-year-old he didn't have to taste it, because this wasn't intended to be a taste activity. And I have a strict no pressure to try things policy based on the evidence. But funny enough, watch what happens next. There you go. That's a good way to do it.
Cut on the edge.
Okay.
Well, did we take some of that out?
Do you want to taste any?
No. One of the activities were touch, smell, taste,
And see. Have you seen it?
see. Yeah.
Have you smelled it?
No.
That's what we're going to do next.
That smells good though. At least this one smells good. And tastes good. Actually, yum.
Yum? I thought you were tasting it.
No, I like yum. Can I have any plenty I want?
Yeah, of course. And then as promised, we moved on to smelling. I put out a jar of cooked cabbage and one of raw cabbage and asked the boys to smell each one and tell me the difference in the 2 smells. They listed off a bunch of adorable words and observations, and then went on to touch and sometimes taste it too.
It smells wet.
And the final thing we did to round out this experiment was to use that shredded cabbage to make some savory cabbage pancakes. I like things like this because it's a food that the kids recognize that they're a little bit more willing to try if they choose to do so. And they were a kind of hit in our house. So now that you've seen the system in action, I hope that you will keep going, because if you do, I know that you will be more likely to help your kids try new foods, including vegetables, over time. I also want to share with you that I have a new product coming out that is designed to help busy parents just like you take some of the guesswork out of introducing new vegetables to their kids. It's called Veggie Explorers Club, and I'm opening up the waitlist now. So if you want to get on the waitlist and also get my cheat sheet on introducing vegetables to kids, you can find that link down below. And if you want more videos like this, you can subscribe to my channel. Thanks so much.